Hi, welcome. We will give it a minute or two more to let some more people join, and then we will start the webinar. So my clock's just turned 33 past 8, so maybe let's get going. Before we get started, just some practical information to the audience. If there's any questions, please enter them into the Q&A function in Zoom. And we will try to answer the questions during the webinar. And if not, we will follow with them up and answer them at a later stage. This webinar is about aligning security and business, and specifically focusing on cybersecurity. And I'm not sure if you read the IDG white paper in the invitation, but from there were some takeaways. For example, that 81% of CIOs feel that they need to focus more on accommodating remote work. And one part of this, which is an extension of this, is that cybersecurity has become more and more relevant into this. And that's also moved up to one of the topics that can be seen as trending right now, because it's getting more and more focus, and there's getting more breaches. We're changing environments and the way we work, and hopefully we can dive deeper into this subject and learn a little bit more about cybersecurity and aligning it to business and how it can affect business. And to answer this, we have a couple of topics and questions that we want to discuss. And those are basically securing your organization, what to look at, how can cybersecurity strategy be aligned to the business strategy, or how can we make sure that cybersecurity benefits the business, and then lastly, take a look at what kind of steps you can take to protect your company, mitigate risk from cybersecurity incidents, and what type of changes you can actually do when it comes to maybe process, practices, tools. And hopefully, if you have any questions to complement this, please add them. Yes, let's start with a poll question. So how much attention do you feel that cybersecurity is getting in your organization, or maybe in a customer organization that you're working with? Good. So maybe if everybody has answered, we can move on. And to introduce the speakers, my name is Philip. I've been with Sofigate for almost 5 years. I'm a certified implementation specialist. for ServiceNow security incident response application. And I've been working the last couple of years with the risk and security related applications at different customers. Sebastian, Marcel, who are you?
So good morning. My name is Marcel Snippen. I'm what we call a solution sales for security operations within ServiceNow. I'm responsible for a module within ServiceNow, security operations, responsible in EMEA North, and I help our customers, our partners, and our account execs with this specific topic. And I do this together with my wingman, Sebastian.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm the solution consultant for SecOps, so more technically involved with the capabilities on the ServiceNow platform. And I'm helping Marcel in the same region in Europe North, which is the Benelux and Scandinavian countries.
Good. Thank you for joining, Marcel and Sebastian. So to get this started, let's have an introduction of Sofigate and ServiceNow. So let's start with Sofigate. Sofigate is one of the leading companies within business technology, and especially in the Nordics, where we are located in Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, with over 600 professionals. Sofigate helps their customers with mainly different types of transformation and digitalizations. We do this by providing expertise in strategy transformations, different technology solutions, and management powers. And we do that through basically two legs that can be summarized as management services and technology solutions. And Sofigate has also developed the technology management framework called Business Technology Standard. So if we move to the next slide. These different legs that we have in Sofigate, management services and technology solutions, can almost be translated into different functionalities. And at a management level, we have operational excellence, where we look at strategy, roadmaps, operating models together with customers, and that together with service design basically translates into different types of services and technical solutions on a platform level that could be different types of workflows, automation, and management of different types of tasks. And this is basically in the business automation part is where ServiceNow comes into the picture, because this is where, from a Sofigate point of view, the tools perspective comes in. So if we change the slide, and ServiceNow and Sofigate has been cooperating in a partnership since 2009. So we have quite a long history together, and pretty recently, Sofigate was awarded and we're very proud of it, the EMEA 2021 Elite Partner of the Year, which we feel is a very prestigious award. And with this, we have over 200 certified ServiceNow experts. We have a lot of experience within ITSM, customer service management, ITBM, risk and security management, but that's which we will touch a little bit on today, but also automation, orchestration, and HR, to name a few. And Sofigate usually helps customers with, could be licenses, different types of implementations, education and trainings, and support and development, basically. And if we move to the next slide, we see some of the customer examples where we have helped to implement ServiceNow since 2009. So let's move to ServiceNow.
So thank you. So yeah, very quick introduction of ServiceNow for the people who don't know. So this is our founder, Fred Luddy, who started ServiceNow in 2004. And Fred Luddy had a vision, and his vision was to build a cloud-based platform that would enable regular people to route work effectively through the enterprise. So what's key about this vision is that Fred was just wanting to route work throughout, throughout the enterprise. So even in the beginning, he was thinking far beyond IT. And IT is the thing we are most well known of. And he wanted to keep it as simple as possible for most people. So you don't have to be a developer to build these workflows. So this message and vision is still relevant today. And we aim to become the defining enterprise software company of the 21st century. So next slide. So the challenge in most organizations is that most work is still unstructured and happening within disparate systems of records. And departments have their own data and system of records that are stored on various legacy technologies. But work happens in silos, lowering productivity and user experience. Because individually, they do not support how work flows across your enterprise. And replacing core systems is an expensive and lengthy process. So the Now platform excels in digitizing that work that flows through a company or across several functions as a unified experience. That's why we call it the Now platform, the platform of platform for business solutions and all workflows, all digital workflows. So our unique differentiation is providing you with one platform which shares one data model, one architecture, as well as many built-in powerful capabilities, such as the ability to easily build cross-enterprise workflows, a single CMDB, machine learning, AI, and predictive analytics, native mobile and conversational interfaces, and a set of no-code and low-code development tools. On top of the platform, we also offer the best-in-class out-of-the-box workflows for IT, but also employee experience, customer experience, and we orchestrate work across the enterprise, which is unique to the industry. These solutions were all developed natively on our platform. And on top of, if you look at the IT platform, we also have our security on top of that, where we are responsible for. So we help organizations in being more effective in security incident response and vulnerability response. And lastly, all of your omni-channel experiences will have out-of-the-box integrations, like the integrations with Slack and Microsoft Teams. So you can deliver great experience to your employees, customers, and partners through these interfaces they basically work with. So I'm now really interested in the outcome of the poll. So if you look at the outcome, how much attention is cybersecurity getting in your organization? There's nobody who answers too much, and there's nobody no attention, which is a good thing. 33% enough, and 67% a little bit, but you should get more. And I think that's where a lot of organizations today are still in a journey, in their cybersecurity journey. And hopefully also the board is making cybersecurity one of their priorities. So if you look at the security market today, you hear a lot about security orchestration, automation, and response, SOAR. This is a market which Gartner defined in 2018 or 2019. But Philip, what is SOAR, and how do organizations best benefit from it?
Yes, thank you, Marcel. Yes, as you said, SOAR stands for Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. And it basically focuses on threat management, security incident response, security operations. And basically, SOAR platform tools or solutions can instantly assess, detect, intervene, or search through incidents and processes without the consistent need for any type of human interaction. And the core capability is basically that you can, with SOAR, you can prioritize incoming threats or potential threats. You can assess the potential impact of that threat or something, if something has occurred. You can triage and remediate what you think is the most important based on a number of factors. And it also allows you to respond to threats accordingly. And basically, SOAR is a way it's designed to basically help security teams manage and respond to the endless alarms that are coming at a increased rate, basically. And different types of SOAR tools and platforms combine comprehensive data gathering, case management, workflows, and different types of analytics to provide organizations to basically implement a more sophisticated, in-depth defense. And some of the benefits of using this on a pretty high level is standardization, automation, orchestration, increased collaboration, repeatability, and efficiency. And this can be seen at both the level of the analyst or the security team that works with this, and it could also generate benefits for the business. And so, some examples of this is that with SOAR, you can build more standardized workflows, streamline operations, increase the flexibility, and especially the collaboration between different types of operational teams, and get them working together in a more sequential sort of way, and can respond more quickly, more accurately, improve time management and productivity, which in this case means that automated responses free of time, basically, for the analysts working with this, and that allows them to effectively manage incidents in another way, so they don't have to basically perform slow manual tasks, and can focus more on actually analyzing and working with what they're specialized in. And it also automates these repeated and also error-prone tasks. So to simply put it, SOAR solutions, they integrate tools, system, applications, teams, basically, within an organization's tool set, and enables the different operational teams, and especially the security-related teams, to automate incident responses into different types of workflows. And one of the main benefits, like we already touched on, is that we can automate, orchestrate time-consuming manual tasks, and without the need for any person to actually be involved in certain stages, which give more time to analysts and allows them to do their job better, basically.
Thank you, Philip. So Sebastian, so looking at the SOAR market, so how does ServiceNow look at the SOAR market?
Yeah, so like Philip said, we see it very similar, but I think it's very important to understand ServiceNow's perspective on the SOAR approach that ServiceNow brings to the market. Because as was explained, the market is full of detection capabilities, such as SIEM solutions, but also SIEM/SOAR solutions, vulnerability scanners, and others. And it is important to understand that we as ServiceNow do not replace those solutions on a SOAR capability per se. Typically, we see organizations have already invested quite some money in those technologies, and for good reasons, because they are basically On top of the data, they are able to aggregate alerts, enrich it, and help the security analyst with this incident fatigue to quickly analyze and maybe take quick triage activities. But that said, even though an organization has spent money and time in investing in a more technical SOAR, we still see that most of them are struggling with the process that basically comes after an incident has been declared. Especially if the dealing with that security incident needs to get routed to multiple teams within the same environment, within the security operations center, communicating with IT, or maybe even other departments within the organization. And that is exactly where we at ServiceNow, being a workflow company, can make a huge difference for an organization. And that also means that instead of replacing already technology organizations have invested in, we just allow them to get more benefit from those investments. That means that we have two-way integrations with most market-leading SIEM SOAR solutions, allowing us to consume that data and add an additional layer of enrichment using both business contextual information, which obviously from ServiceNow we can get mostly from our CMDB, but then also help to streamline the remediation process by leveraging our low-code, no-code runbook capabilities. And let me just quickly give you an example of how that actually looks like. So what you're looking at here is the analyst workbench within ServiceNow SecOps. And I will just quickly touch on two examples of a security incident. One that comes from a Splunk environment, and the other one which is more related to phishing, which is obviously also an attack that most organizations are targeted with today. So the important thing here is that we see that we are able to consume alerts, offenses, or incidents from the detection correlation technology, and then basically leverage a auto analysis phase, which allows us to make security runbooks, which we see on this side that are mapped to the NIST phases, much more dynamic in nature. So that means that because we are able to look up additional threat intel information, do historic searches within the SIEM solution, get additional data about the affected system or users, we are able to make security runbooks dynamic in nature, which you can also see here in the low-code, no-code runbook designer you see in front of you, which basically shows that a security analyst runbook is kicked off when a specific security incident is triggered. And once that happened, we are able to kick off additional activities in a parallel manner. That also means that we can then leverage that output in a decision matrix to decide how the security response tasks should become populated, and based on the finding of threat intelligence or indicators of compromise, or based on a particular response an end user actually came back with. And that you basically see happening right here. In the case we have an indicator of compromise and somebody clicked on a malicious link, we might want to take a direct action and disable the user. However, if that is not the case, then we basically might want to ask the security analyst to perform some additional manual analysis and then ask them a question to find out if the security incident should be considered a false positive or not. Now, that basically shows that both on a technical perspective, but also on a process perspective, we can help organizations streamline those tedious tasks that Philip also mentioned. Those typical activities that analysts will have to perform at the moment that they receive a certain kind of security incident. What you're seeing now is an example of a phishing email, which typically then also requires you to look up additional threat intel lookup data, or even submit the phishing alert into a sandbox for further analysis. Now, in this case, you can see that due through these integrations with additional technology and also ServiceNow data, we were able to complete automated enrichment activities that are part of the NIST phases of dealing with this type of security incident. And then basically ask the analyst directly if they would like to remove additional security phishing incidents or phishing emails that might exist in the email store of this user, or other users. And that is just an example of how we can help organizations combine different technology together and make sure that the process between technology, people within the SOC and outside the SOC can be streamlined. So I was just wondering if there are any comments or questions from the audience on this topic.
I can just add that, yeah, like you brought up, that these capabilities that ServiceNow can offer regarding to SOAR and security incidents is something that's really useful and can help a lot of customers.
So there are no questions in the Q&A. So all the entities, please, if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A and we'll address them during the webinar or maybe after if we don't have a direct answer. Philip, if you look at a lot of organizations are being hacked, and one of the most common used attack vector is leveraging vulnerabilities. Although I see most companies have vulnerability scanners in-house. So what is your opinion about the effectiveness of vulnerability management programs?
Yes. Firstly, just to define maybe what a vulnerability is, so we're all on the same page. So basically, a vulnerability is when an external threat actor can gain unauthorized access or control to an application, service, endpoint, or server. And to deal with this is pretty important. And usually what we see is that there's some type of vulnerability management process in place, which is a cyclical process when you basically identify, evaluate, treat, and report on these vulnerabilities. And on the image, you can see basically a high-level process mapped out. And in this process, yeah, it's important to basically discover what you're unaware of to make sure that you're secure. And the first step in this is to actually scan your environments and to actually scan, to make sure that you scan the right environment. It could be applications, could be infrastructure. And the result of that would most likely result in that you find vulnerabilities in your environment. Maybe it's on a server. Then it's important to actually prioritize and assess the vulnerability to see how much of a threat is this vulnerability actually. Should we, what should we do with it? Who should handle it? And in this step, yeah, you want to remediate vulnerabilities as soon as possible, but it's also important to know that there's different options when you remediate. You could actually remediate, which could be, and a good example of that is actually patching software remediates vulnerabilities. But there could also be some different types of mitigations that you can do that decrease the risk of a vulnerability exploiting you. And also, this is not the preferred option, but it might be a realistic one, that you just have to accept that this vulnerability exists in your environment. It could be that the likelihood or impact of a vulnerability being exploited isn't that high, and maybe the effort to actually remediate this vulnerability might not be worth it. And when, for example, let's say you patch your server, then you want to verify that it's actually been remediated. So in that step, you rescan the mentioned server to see if the vulnerability is there or not. And then basically from this, you try to construct reports, KPIs that allows you to understand the current state of risk in your organizations revolving around vulnerabilities. And the importance of this is basically to have a good practice when it comes to vulnerability management, is that it's vital to minimize the organization's attack surface. And every new vulnerability introduces risk to the organization. And some challenges with that we see today, especially with customers, is there's an increasing number of vulnerabilities being found when you scan your environment. So it's getting more and more important to actually prioritize and remediate what is most important. And what is most important then? Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer sometimes. And that could be looking at critical business services, or it could be a very high risk vulnerability. But there's also complexity in the process in itself to make sure that the people that actually can do something about this actually get the opportunity to. Because what we see is that vulnerability assignment and ownership can be somewhat unclear, and which means that maybe instead of the server team getting the information that there is a vulnerability on their server and they need to remediate it, maybe the actual action goes to someone who is on a too high of a level and can't actually do anything, or it gets routed to people that don't understand. And these are common mistakes that we see at our customers.
So thank you, Philip. Sebastian, how does ServiceNow see and help customers to be more effective in their vulnerability process?
Yeah, so we see a very similar thing. Of course, like most of our customers have invested already in certain detection capabilities, such as SIEM solutions on the incident side. On the vulnerability management side, they typically already invested in scanners, and sometimes even multiple scanners, even for multiple purposes. So infrastructure, application, or even hardening scanners. But that said, they still typically lag a streamlined process to how to handle that massive amount of output. Because it is not surprising to hear customers say that they have multiple thousands, million, or even multiple millions of outstanding vulnerabilities at every moment, every time, any moment of the day. And that is mainly due to the fact that the response task, similarly to the security incident response, the vulnerability response process is pretty much broken. And ServiceNow has a capability to help organizations there. And the primary difference where we can help with organizations is to basically shift from a vulnerability management, so more the traditional way of getting the spreadsheet or the data from the scanners. And here we have just listed a few because those are the typical ones that we see, but then move to a more organized vulnerability response process. And that, first of all, starts with our ability to match vulnerability data from scanners to data that might exist within the CMDB. So that helps us to not only additionally adapt the risk scoring of this vulnerability based on the impact that that vulnerability might have, but might also allow us to see who the potential system owners or support group of that piece of technology actually is. Now, apart from that layer of information, we also can use threat intelligence and NIST information data and exploit information to modify this risk rating even more. And then what we do is that we are able to put vulnerabilities into resolver buckets. So that allows an organization to basically decide how they would like to take action on group. So instead of working with thousands or 1 million vulnerabilities on a one-to-one basis, we basically are able to create resolver buckets, assign them automatically to the target audience, which are then able to actually make a quick decision. Should we patch it or should we defer it? So let's have a quick view on how that actually looks like. So what you see here in front of you is a out-of-the-box dashboard that somebody within the organization that is basically an owner of a piece of infrastructure could have when they log in ServiceNow. So first of all, here they get a clear picture of all the vulnerabilities that are assigned to one of the groups that this person is a member of, how critical those are for the environment, but also tells them a little bit which vulnerabilities they would need to address first based on the remediation target timelines, such as the SLAs. So if we have a critical vulnerability, we might want to impose the organization to act on it within a couple of hours, whereas for less important vulnerabilities, that can be a couple of days or even longer. Now, as I mentioned, we typically group vulnerabilities in resolver buckets, and that allows us to also allow the team to get a quick understanding of why certain vulnerabilities have been grouped together, and then also take bulk actions. And as this screen is loading, I will just give you just a quick example of what that actually means. So here we can see that we have vulnerabilities that are targeting a specific system of which an exploit is known, and those contain 29 different types of vulnerabilities. So we can click on this group and then, of course, take a few actions. We can look at the vulnerabilities that are detected here, which in this case come from Tenable, but we can also take bulk actions, such as alerting our CDC or SOC and create a security incident, create a change request, which basically allows us to interact directly with the operations team to request a patch to be enrolled, or allow them to request an exception, which might be very relevant for them to do. Maybe they would like to accept the risk or state that they have placed a mitigative control in place, which basically makes this vulnerability less applicable to our particular environment. Now, of course, as you can see here, you are entitled to give a certain end date and also a reason of why you are requesting this. And ServiceNow being ServiceNow, this will obviously go through a workflow in which certain people are notified and then also requested approval at the moment they would like to, at the moment they have validated that this input is accurate. But one thing that is also important to understand is that all the valuable data that your scanning technology is giving you, in this case Tenable, is not lost. And that is, of course, very important because you're paying for this technology to tell you exactly why something is getting detected and how to eventually remediate that. All that information through our integrations is also consumed and therefore not lost. Even so, we are even better to reprioritize the risk, as we can see right here. Tenable in this case gave a certain risk score, whereas we actually bumped it up based to the relationships of the system on which the vulnerability was detected. Additionally, we can add all kinds of information, including exploitability, NIST information, but also even patch information for the persons that should evaluate this in order for them to better understand what is going on and how to effectively remediate this. Now, of course, showing this kind of information on a organizational level and system owner level is very important. The item that I want to finish off with is also to just give you a quick overview of how this data can then be quickly sliced and diced by the security team. That is now, instead of in a role of following up the organization, to be more in a management role where they can understand what their attack landscape is at any moment in time. And if they focus on a specific type of vulnerabilities, such as ones that have an exploit available, directly see what their mean time to remediate for such vulnerabilities are, how many of them are existing, and why their risk score might be changing over a particular moment in time. This also allows them to dive into the details. So from those graphs, actually see the trends, and then also dive into the actual records for them to have conversations with the related team owners to understand why specific vulnerabilities did not get addressed accordingly. So that is a quick overview of how ServiceNow tries to help organizations with speeding up their vulnerability response process. So just curious to find out if anybody in the audience has any comments on that.
So no comments in the Q&A, and also in interest of time, go to the next question. So CISOs ask themselves, how secure is your organization? And are they doing better or worse? So Philip, how best to measure a company's security maturity?
Yeah, that's measuring security in an organization is pretty hard. It's to say exactly where you are. You can always be secure until something happens, but generally speaking, there are a couple of steps you can take to actually to make sure that you have some standard practices in place, maybe to make sure that you have at least some level of maturity. And basically is you look at your processes, your practices that you have in place, or to see, do we actually have something for this? And the next step would be probably to look how well do they work together? What is the outcome of them? How do they integrate with each other? How is the cooperation between different teams to actually get something done here? How does these different types of processes map into each other, so we can utilize them together to create synergies. Other types of steps to look at is the toolings perspective. At some customers, we see that just upgrading tools could be a big step towards becoming a more mature organization. But if you start to look at the top of this, and this is basically where the most things start, and that's where you want to look at the strategy level and see what do we have defined in terms of KPIs. Do we have roadmaps or defined goals that we want to achieve? And a result of that is usually to look at the organization's culture and how security aware it is, because basically that's a good indicator as well to see how well you work with your organization in terms of different types of security and risk, and also to basically assess how strong is your weakest link. And some of the challenges that we've seen at different customers is that some of these processes maybe be undocumented, or they've changed since they were documented. There are basically no run books or playbooks defined, or they haven't been maintained. There's a lot of manual tasks in these processes. There's some type of uncertainties regarding their SIEM solutions or security tools, what they can do, how they can best utilize them. And also a very common mistake is that there's too many silos, too many isolated teams within the organizations that work independently instead of working together. And there's a number of steps you can take here to try to identify the current pain points, structures, see what kind of expertise you actually have within your organization, different types of security incident response plays. But a good way to start is to actually take a look at how you want to secure your organization, and basically describe what good looks like, and try to translate that into actions, and to make it contribute to positive business outcomes.
So thank you, Philip. So Sebastian, how can ServiceNow help in the maturity of measuring the maturity of an organization?
Yeah, so that typically starts with understanding the maturity model that we can help organizations go through, in combination, of course, with a partner such as Sofigate. And why? Because it basically allows an organization to understand where they are currently at, and also basically slow them down a little bit in their aspirations. Because typically, if we talk to a customer, they will honestly say that they are anything in between 0 and 1. But they would basically want to end up in step 3 by tomorrow. And that is, of course, not possible. And that basically means that you have to have a step-by-step process, which allows you, especially with the security incident response capabilities, to take it on a workflow, on a use case per use case perspective. And then on a use case perspective, think which tooling is necessary, and measure the result of a certain process over a certain amount of time. And based on that data, then decide what good should look like and basically implement automation and orchestration. And just to give you a quick example of how that looks like, here we are looking at a dashboard that has been specifically built for security incident response, where we can, of course, tell you on a trend-based perspective how security analysts are dealing with particular security categories of attacks, and also how your technology is helping you to declare a positive or false positive security incident, which can also tell you a little bit about the state and the health of the technology that you're leveraging. Similarly to the vulnerability example that you've already seen, this also then allows us to give you a little bit insight on how your cyber risk is changing, and if that may be an indicator for you to work and better and basically change a certain process. Ultimately, looking at security incidents by stages also allows you to identify which security incidents within, for example, the NIST phase take particularly long during moving from analysis to containment. Is that the reason because they are missing adequate data, or is that because the process is just not effective enough? Now, similarly that we can do this for security incident response, we also have this kinds of information for vulnerability response. So here again, it's a very similar approach, and we basically leverage the same kind of dashboards that you've already seen. They're all trend-based KPIs enabled, allowing you to see how the needle is changing over a longer period of time. And that is ultimately also our goal. So security incident and vulnerability and configuration management is really to build on the day-to-day visibility, detection and coverage and understanding and making sure that the organization is able to do their day-to-day activities effectively. Then based on that day-to-day activities, you're able to measure KPIs and make that visible in trend-based reports that you've just seen. That does not only allow us to give you an insight on how your cyber risk is changing, but it also actually gives you a lot of actionable data, which you can leverage to improve your cyber maturity. And with that, I think it's almost time for the last question.
Yeah, so correct, Sebastian. So last question, Philip. We see cybersecurity to become more important and a board level discussion. So how do you know if cybersecurity strategy is aligned to the business strategy? And should cybersecurity be part of a board level discussion?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if we look at the answers that we've gone through earlier in this webinar, I think that answers a little bit the question basically if you know that cybersecurity is part of the business strategy and to see how much attention it's actually getting, because recognizing cybersecurity is kind of, it should be a prerequisite to fulfilling business objectives and not be the end goal basically. But there's a lot of benefits from aligning cybersecurity to the business strategy, and some ways to spot it is to see, like we spoke before, of processes, practices, strategy, what's defined in the strategy, broken down in the strategy. It could be also, like we said before, security awareness. And some of the benefits to this is compliance with local regulations and policies, and we've seen a lot of attention with that regarding, for example, GDPR was a pretty big event that a lot of businesses invested time and effort in informing and educating their personnel. there are benefits to data assurance, security, and integrity for the business, which basically, if you lower your risk, you have having low risk in your organization is preferable to high risk and allows you to mostly operate in the market with trust, and also it can affect your brand reputation. And when we speak about brand reputation, it's basically you don't want to be exploited by some threats that publicly. So this is basically brand reputation. It's basically avoiding getting mentioned within this. And other types of benefits is that your environments perform better. They're more available, and it also affects culture, policy, and how you govern them. But there's also some cost benefits into this as well. And since we see that cyber attacks are continuously growing, both in terms of scale and quality, the negative impacts of these attacks on any business are becoming more threatening. And generally, I think that's why we think that cybersecurity and business objectives should go hand in hand as kind of a necessity to ensure that the organizations are becoming more capable at mitigating security risks on both a practical level and a strategic level. And so to make sure that the organization's success shouldn't be hindered by these types of actions, and that you should see a positive ROI in these security investments.
Thank you, Philip. So Sebastian, how can ServiceNow help in understanding if the cybersecurity strategy is aligned to the business strategy?
Yeah, so like Philip said, organizations are becoming more and more risk aware. So business strategy is typically very much related to risk management. What are the investments we should do next to grow our business, and what's the risk of not doing it, but also what's the risk of our daily operations to our organization. So typically, as within ServiceNow, we are able to combine security operations and also our GRC IRM capabilities. We can basically help organizations to streamline those capabilities together, which ultimately means that an organization can get dynamic insight based on security data, how their compliance and risk is impacted, but also reduce cost by taking away those tedious manual tasks of providing evidence, doing control checks, and doing additional validations of it by leveraging automation and evidence finding or continuous control and continuous risk monitoring by combining security operations and GRC/IRM together. And due to that, organizations also recognize that we are very much able to help them establish an ISMS, as an Information Security Management System, or a DTRM, a Dynamic Threat Risk Management Platform. And that all starts with risk management. Organizations will need to do risk assessments to establish their risk appetite and the risk they would like to measure. And then, of course, link it to control management. So which compliance controls or objectives are related to controlling this risk? And how does that relate then also to regulatory requirements from a compliancy perspective? Now, typically in a day-to-day business, we see that the second line of activity and the first line of defense, which is basically the day-to-day job of dealing with security incidents and vulnerabilities, is very much disconnected from each other. So we typically hear stories about people within the Security Operations Center explaining that they are sending screenshots of 2 years ago or evidence that is really not accurate anymore just to get rid of those compliance and risk checks. Now, what if the organization could actually sample that data live by looking at live data within the security incident and also the vulnerability space, allowing an organization to quickly sample if they are, for example, adhering to certain patch management controls, or breach management capabilities, or understanding how their CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability scores are negatively impacted. Now, of course, then we also have to demonstrate that. And that is exactly what you will see here. In this example, we're looking at an out-of-the-box CISO dashboard in which we represent high-level KPIs on a SOC perspective, explaining the CISO in this perspective, how they are performing on dealing with security incidents, on a identification, containment, and eradication perspective, but also on a vulnerability level. So how are our vulnerabilities changing over time? Is our trend going up or down? And which vulnerabilities typically have a higher impact to the organization than others? Now, ultimately, that can be just used to measure your cyber risk, and looking at how this data can be combined with, for example, hardening requirements coming from PCI, ISO, NIST, and other documents. But if we are looking at a full ISMS and also a dynamic threat risk management capabilities, then of course those controls must come from different kind of regulatory documents. So that is also why within the compliance capabilities, we can look at very technical, but also non-technical compliance objectives, and sometimes even are able to sample that data based on information we already log within our solution. And of that, you see an example right here. If we are, for example, looking at effective patch management, for example, we can see that, hey, we need to measure the effective patch management affecting our electronic messaging devices, so it's typically our Exchange environment. And here we see an example of an automated control check that is running on a scheduled basis, which basically comes back with a result and also evidence of why a specific control is now deemed to be ineffective. Now that on itself can impact risk directly, but we can also sample risk on its own. So that means that within the risk module of ServiceNow, we are able to sample both technical, cyber, but also operational, financial, or other types of risk. And with that, I hopefully that gave a good overview of how we can basically bring cybersecurity and relate that to strategic requirements of an organization, which are typically very much aligned to corporate compliance requirements, but also to corporate risk management capabilities.
So thank you, Sebastian. So we ran a little bit over time. I want to thank you very much for joining this webinar. I hope it was useful and answered some of your questions on how Sofigate and ServiceNow can help in defining your cybersecurity strategy in your organization. So after the webinar, we will send out a thank you note and some additional materials for you to read. If you have any additional questions or remarks, please do not hesitate to reach out to us.